Impact of influence.
Covering true crime throughout the Southeast.
Hello, friend. Matt Harris and Seton Tucker. So grateful you get to spend time with us. And make sure you support our sponsors. That's pretty darn important. And we're part of the Evergreen Podcast Company. And if they want to get in contact with us,
You can find us on Facebook at Impact of Influence and also on our YouTube channel.
there is more on Nancy Mace. We've had 2 episodes out so far, but there's more on that we'll be releasing soon. So don't think we're drifting away from that or the Spivey case. We're kind of pounding
We
these
have
things out as it
a
happens.
lot of things in the works at the moment.
Yes. But first, we want to talk about Alex Murdaugh and the latest. So we bring in Jenn Wood from FITSNews. So we bring in ace reporter, investigator, journalist Jenn Wood from FITSNews, and we're grateful you're going to spend time with us. We do appreciate that. FITSNews.com. She's been on top of Murdaugh and many of the other things, Spivey, etc. And it's cool that we can get along and share information like that. And you did some hard work on this latest Murdaugh mess. So let's start from the beginning of the latest. What was your FOIA, for those who know, Freedom of Information Act request?
So after the trial, we had requested, I wanted the entire investigative file. The case had been adjudicated, and I know they withhold information. If you ask for an investigative report, typically they'll say, it is an open case and we can't provide that yet, but you get it when it's over. So after Alec was found guilty, I did a massive FOIA request to SLED for, everything. And I specifically wanted the cell phone records just because I was curious. I wanted the Cellbrite data. I wanted to see, I wanted to see if they had done a subpoena for cell tower information, who was at that house that night or not. But actually, the FOIA on the cell phone records was denied because it would have been too much work to redact. So I actually got it from another source. I can't say where, how, or why, but I've had it for a long time. And what made me look at it again was when SLED agent David Owen testified during the Colucci file. And I think Seton and I had talked about it right afterwards, how he talked about how when he provides information to the prosecutors regarding the investigation, specifically with text messages, he determines what's relevant and provides that to them for their prosecution case. And I remembered seeing all of these really interesting texts right before and right after the murder, and the Cellbrite information that I was provided from cousin Eddie specifically was the one that I wanted to look at. That wasn't in the timeline. So the day after the murder, when he says he's going to meet him at the fishing hole, I was like, well, that's interesting. Where's the fishing hole? Why is he meeting Eddie at the fishing hole
It
the
seemed
day?
seemed like some sort of code message for something. I mean, like,
Right.
we don't know what that could be. Was that having to do with this alleged drug addiction or maybe disposable of weapons? We don't know. But, going back to what you just said a minute ago, is that it's a little bit unusual to me that the SLED agents decide what they think is important and what they don't, because someone else may look at this with a fresh set of eyes and say, well, wait a second, this might mean something. And I think that's kind of what you've done here.
Right. And, I think, as we look at the appeal, I've always been curious, what's if he does get the verdict overturned and there is a new trial, what will be included? Like, this trial is going to be a different trial. So, I'm looking at all of what I have. I wanted to look at it from that lens as well. I certainly didn't expect the defense, Dick Harpootlian, to come out and say that they were not provided with those texts. I've just kind of looking at taking a fresh look at the case again.
Well, how many pages are we talking about here of, was it, I assume hundreds.
It is, yeah. So the Cellbrite download, when it comes in the massive file, and there's, it's basically Excel spreadsheets. So you get the SMS messages, so text messages, MMS messages, calls to and from, and you have to like figure out, the cell number, it doesn't come who it's to, it's just the cell number. So I took the timeline that the state had presented during the trial and kind of matched up the cell numbers that were in there because those weren't redacted, which has always surprised me,
Yeah.
and matched them up with the records that I had, and then kind of started doing some digging and where I could find 'cause cell numbers are the hardest thing to research because people change their numbers a lot. So where I could find numbers with reverse searches, I would kind of match those up and see what I could find. Some I was successful, some I'm, not real confident on. So that's why, with the unknown number that I mentioned in my article that he was meeting up with somebody, we don't know who it is. I've got a name, but I'm not sure if that was 4 years ago, the same person that had that number.
And where did you begin? Like a day before, 2 days before, the day of the murder? Or where did you focus? Where did you zero in on?
So the records go from May 1st until I believe July or June 10th, I believe, is when it stops. So, and I went through all of them.
This
Yeah.
is why you're a researcher. Matt and I are too ADD to take on a project like this. How many hours did it take you to go through all of this?
Oh, I mean, I would just kind of go back, it's days. I mean, I would just kind of look at it and, put it aside, work on another story, and then go back in and start going back through it again. And, it has been a while since I looked at it. And that testimony in June from David Owen, I was like, I'm going to look at those again. And, so I'm kind of refreshing my memory what I had put in there before.
So David Owen is in charge of picking out of that giant file what he gives to the prosecution, and then whatever the prosecution gets, has to turn over to the defense. Am I right
I,
on that?
I, that sounds, Seton, does that sound about
I,
how he
I
presented it
I
or?
think that's how he presented it, and I guess he did not deem any of these messages from Eddie Smith to be worthy of being included in this timeline.
Because it would seem like just give the file over, the whole file over.
Well,
Right, that's
you know
what.
what though? Well, okay.
Right.
As we're talking, just today, FITSNews came out with a report. Uh, I guess the defense said that they didn't receive this information, and what has the state said?
The Attorney General's office came back and said they absolutely did receive this information. And in fact, they received more than our investigators and prosecutors have, because before anybody could look at it, it had to go through a what they call it, a taint review, where they have attorneys look at it and make sure nothing's being handed over related to any attorney-client relationships that Alec had.
Right, because so he
So,
was an attorney, so his clients would still have that attorney-client privilege with him. That
right,
was the
right.
reasoning.
But you would think that
Yes,
there would be something that says you are handing over to his attorneys, so the attorney-client privilege be passed along to those attorneys, if that makes sense.
right, right. And I do think they do keep all of the, like, there is a record of what was transmitted. I've never seen the back end of Discovery, but I do think there's like date and time stamps. And they said that they are researching it to make sure that they can indeed prove that they sent that over. Um,
So what?
so
Well, I mean, we'll have to see how this shakes out because
yeah,
after your article, we hear from Dick Harpootlian. I think he posted on Twitter, and he gave y'all a comment as well saying, "No, I never received this information." Now the state is saying, "Yes, you did." So it could be multiple things happened. It could be that they did receive this information, they just somehow missed it because it's not really the state's. They're putting
right.
their best case forward as the defense is. So I don't think they're really under any sort of obligation to put things that they don't think helps their case, what they're presenting to the jury.
Exactly.
That's the
Like
defense's
that
obligation.
didn't surprise me at all that they did. I wouldn't have included that either because that, could play into the jury's mind. Maybe he was meeting up with, for drug deals. Maybe there was going on more. But
Or disposal
you
of
know,
weapons, possibility.
right. Yeah, there's the other thing we've never found. They've never found those weapons that were involved in the murder. So, maybe that made sense to me. But what didn't make sense to me is why the defense didn't kind of pull that in somehow to throw some reasonable doubt in there. And Dick told Fox News, if he had had access to these messages, it may have changed his decision whether or not to call Eddie Smith to the stand to testify.
I know. And that was, like what we had heard during the trial was he was just too much of a wild card for both sides to present him. He was what under subpoena to testify, but he was not called by the defense or prosecution. So they were saying, I guess, maybe if these messages we'd received them, maybe we would have decided to call him.
Let's talk about the message.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
talk about what.
So your first article, you talked about some of the messages. Explain what the highlights of that. I mean, what caused Harpootlian to go, what?
Right. So in the days before the murder, he was texting back and forth with Eddie, can you get me a check? I've got to get these boys some more. So what
Right.
the check was for, well, who the boys were. I mean, look, let's be objective. Maybe he was setting up a contracting job for him, and he had to
Well, we know
get
he
a
did. We know
check.
he did
Yeah,
the Phoenix
You're
thing.
right.
yeah, we don't know for sure, but I mean, it could have been anything.
Right. So, but or maybe as the charges against Eddie have alleged, he was providing Alex with drugs, and that was a drug deal. Um, so I don't know what that was. There was also a text. So they had included in the timeline calls to and from a man named Kenneth Singleton. And in the text messages, Kenneth Singleton, he says, Alex says to Kenneth, I've got a loan for you for $1,750.
Hmm.
Who's the like?
It
Who's
was
the
that
loan?
was, I thought Kenneth Singleton texts were very strange. There was something going, and didn't he? I'm just trying to refresh my memory. Didn't he like show up the law firm to pick up the check?
Right.
And who is he?
So who is he? What is this loan? Who's the loan coming from? Is it from the law firm? Is it from Alex personally? Is Palmetto State Bank involved? I don't know.
Right. Right.
But for it to be the day of the actual murders, I thought was really quite interesting. And then there was a text from Blanca where she texts Alex and says, the medicine I found in your pants pocket, I put in a cup on your nightstand.
So that kind of maybe confirms what the defense has said is that Alec Murdaugh had a drug problem. And so if,
Right,
if Blanca finds this cup, these drugs in his pocket, and she places the pills in a cup next to the bed, that maybe corroborates the suspicion that he had a drug problem.
right, exactly.
But also
And
points
then,
out that other people that she was aware.
right,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, I mean, so that, and then we get to these texts that, on June 8th, the day after the murder, where, they're trying to get through to a number, the number won't go through, she won't answer. I don't know why it won't go through. And there clearly three people, including cousin Eddie, meeting up at a place called the Fishing Hole.
The
I,
fishing hole. I want to know
the
where this
fish,
fishing hole is and
Me
what.
too.
Yeah.
I knew where it was in Mayberry.
I
I knew
don't think
where.
you're
Oh,
going to. I don't think you're going to a fishing hole the day after your son and wife were murdered. I just don't think
I
that that is something you
don't
would
believe
plan
there
on. I
was
don't
any
think you're having like a
fishing going on.
leisurely fishing expedition after your wife and son have died.
and just so people
Right,
to refresh their memory, because you might be thinking, well, that's when the attempted suicide, murder for hire, whatever you want to call it, that wasn't until Labor Day. So
right,
this was
This
a
June, and that was Labor Day.
completely
Yeah.
different meeting, just so you don't people don't get confused that maybe he was talking about that because that wasn't it.
right.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's just some really bizarre messages when you look at the timing of them.
I was talking to my dad about this morning and said, what sort of obligation? And he says, from a defense standpoint, you're always going to say, well, we need everything because, yeah, nothing that was said in these texts were like a bombshell, like, oh, I did it. Or cousin Eddie says, I saw you do it. Or I'm taking the guns and throwing them in the river. None of that. But what can happen is it can take you down a path of things to explore.
Right, exactly. And it can help you build your case as a defense attorney. Um, and Dick and Jim have always said that from day one, Alex was the only suspect people looked at. No additional suspects were ever that, that has been their argument. There's been no investigation into any other potential suspects. And did they invest? I don't know. I don't know if they investigated this lead and determined that it was a nothing burger. Maybe they did. Or maybe what Dick and Jim have said has some validity.
Right. I mean, I think it's probably a common defense thing to say they zeroed them into my client.
Right.
That's pretty common, I would believe. What is interesting also, and I don't know specifically when it comes to this text, but your thoughts on this is you remember when the Rivers and Roberts, I think it was, they got arrested before Alec was already in jail, but they got arrested, and even Creighton Waters took the time. I believe he was at these small time drug guys hearing, and he talked about drugs, the flowing to and from, and implying Alex and these guys and all together. But then poof, that was never heard
Gone.
from again.
Yeah. Nothing. I mean, I think plea deals were made. We don't know
And we don't know what's
anything
happening with
else.
Eddie. Eddie,
Eddie's
it's
still
like,
hanging in the wind.
and that's another thing. So if there is another trial and the defense is aware whether they were missed it or whether it was, withheld from them, now they're aware. If Alex does get a new trial, we will probably hear from cousin Eddie, but cousin Eddie's health is not good. So I don't know how long it could
I
take.
was talking to somebody down in Hampton at Colleton, and I mentioned that, well, maybe they're just kind of waiting for him to die. And they said, well, I just saw him at Walmart the other day grocery shopping. He looked fine.
Oh, well,
Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh,
oh, wow. That's good to know
uh,
because we had just heard that he was just not in good health and
That's why they let him. One of the reasons I heard
but
they let him out,
we don't
right?
know what's happening. Yeah, we don't know what's happening with with his prosecution in regards to this Labor Day stuff.
not, I mean, the charges are still pending. It has been almost 4 years.
Yeah.
I checked a couple of weeks ago on the public index, and there's been no movement in years. Now the 13th Circuit, where the charges are out of, is extremely backlogged. But 4 years seems like a very long time to me.
No, that's one of the biggest questions we always get. What's happening with cousin Eddie? I'm like, your guess is as good as ours. We don't know. I mean, he's just kind of seems like in limbo.
Is he still wearing an ankle
Yeah,
monitor? Do we know that?
yes,
Okay.
he does still have an ankle monitor on.
So it's kind
As
of,
a
if he didn't do anything, let's say, we just take him out of the picture. A person wearing an ankle monitor for 4 years without seeing a trial seems awful unfair to someone.
Michael Colucci wore one for 10
Yeah,
years.
that's true.
Yeah,
He had
yeah.
and he said he got neuropathy from wearing an ankle monitor for 10 years. It took so long for him to come to trial.
Those things
Um,
are bulky. I can
I
see
was
that.
so shocked when when I was at the Colucci trial. When he was speaking to people after, he lifts up his pants and he shows this thing. It is big. It's like the
Yeah,
size, probably bigger than like a packet of cigarettes or something along those lines. Like it's huge. And I'm sure I don't know how you can sleep with that on. I mean, I guess you get used to it, but
I
I
don't.
know they
Yeah, I mean
need to be
that.
I'm not saying people don't need to be
Yes, of
monitored.
course they
So,
do.
but of
Yes,
course
yes.
they need to be monitored. But I do think that wearing an ankle monitor for an extended amount of time probably does have some health consequences.
I thought there was a speedy trial thing somewhere in the Constitution, but
Yeah, it is beyond me. And he is just no movement, nothing.
so when did Harpootlian contact you and ask for all the stuff?
Yes.
Okay, and did he ask where you got it or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell him,
Right,
but
right, right.
yeah,
Has Alan Wilson or anybody from that office contacted you?
no. I mean, we reached out to them to get comments, but no, not in terms of requesting where we got anything.
Okay, all right.
So let's talk about if by chance this could be another factor. If these weren't provided, we don't know that they're necessarily exculpatory information, but that could bolster Alec Murdaugh's bid to get a new trial. And then what is the new trial going to look like if he does get one? Because we're going to probably hear from Eddie Smith if he's still around. We're going to see probably some of these communications. And also, we have a serious credibility issue with David Owens after the Colucci trial. Do you want to
Right.
weigh in?
I think to me, if his verdict was overturned and he does get a new trial, I think it's going to be a completely different trial. I mean, first of all, he pled guilty to all of the financial crimes, so we're not likely to see those come in because it would be prior bad act. I mean, so that's 6 weeks where there was a trial within the trial where they were presenting in-camera witnesses to determine whether or not that would be allowed in. We're not going to see that this time. So how
However,
do
any
they?
juror from that area is going to know, right? I mean, obviously.
Right. Well, I mean, I also think we're going to. I mean, we're going to see a change of venue. There's no way they can have it back down there again. I don't know that it's going to make a difference in South Carolina ever. I mean,
Right.
where are they going to change
No,
it to the moon?
I know everyone knows. One comment though that we did get on our Facebook page was, what do these prove? They don't prove
Nothing.
anything. They don't prove anything, but they don't disprove anything, and they just, I think, create questions. Again, I don't think anything in these messages proves that he had nothing to do with it. In some ways, they might prove that he had something to do with it.
Exactly. To me, it doesn't prove anything. It just made me question the overall. It made me question a lot of things. I mean, and there are, I still have a lot of questions about, like, I just think there's a lot of loose ends that didn't get tied up with that conviction. That I do think somebody was supplying Alec with drugs. Were those people held accountable? I have heard rumors of massive drug trafficking, gambling rings down there.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, that's the thing we were asked, and I had said when we were at the library doing our speech, that's one of the things I said was, okay, he bought this massive amount of drugs, according to Alec,
Right.
massive amount. So you're not going to wonder where it's coming from. I mean, maybe they are. We don't know. Maybe they're investigating, but you have like checks and things like that, and a person who says he bought ridiculous amounts of drugs, aren't you wondering? It's in my state and it's in my town. Where the hell is it coming from?
Right. And is the amount of drugs that they said that he was doing feasible? There's no way he was doing 60 pills a day.
Absolutely not.
There is no way.
Right.
No way.
well, he says he was, but I mean, we obviously Alec has massive credibility issues himself.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Right. And then, and then somebody's like, well, why didn't Alec tell his attorneys about the text? I don't
yes,
know.
yeah,
I
that
know
was, we
that.
also received that
It's a good
comment. Like,
point.
wasn't it his responsibility to tell his attorneys that, hey, looking at this timeline, I texted other people, including uh, Eddie Smith that day, but he didn't
Right.
reveal that. So, but then
We don't know
maybe if
yet.
he was doing 60 pills a day, he doesn't remember what he was texting at that point. Or maybe there was another reason that he didn't want to reveal that information.
Maybe he told them.
Right. I mean, they're all really valid points, and yeah, but in the end, I like, does this answer any questions? No. Is it interesting? Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Really interesting.
curious on when they go to the appeals court, when they go there, the Supreme Court, okay, so you have all these little things. Do they decide all the little things as a whole, or do they go, well, this one's not much, this one's not much, this one's not, so it's out?
Well,
Do you know what I'm saying? Does it
remember,
pile up as a lot of little things make it okay, as opposed to each separately might not be enough, but together,
well, remember that first they just wanted to just deal with this jury tampering stuff.
yeah.
And then the Supreme Court said, nope, you have to present all of your issues at once,
Mhm.
which the other, I think, biggest thing in the appeal was the allowal of the financial crimes to
How
the
much of
extent that they did. So that is being in this hearing that we expect later this year, they're having to present all of that. So I think that, or I talked to my dad, he said there's a good possibility that they're going to probably file something if they did not receive the full text messages. They'll probably file a motion to add this, I would think. I don't know exactly
Yeah,
how
and
the procedure works.
yeah, I don't either. I know the state's response is due early next month. And the Attorney General's office did file a letter with the Supreme Court saying that they are going to meet that timeline, and it may actually come a little early. So that will be that their response to the appeal will be filed by, I think August 10th was the 90 days, that the extension they got. And then the defense will have 30 days to file their response to that appeal. So do they file, I don't know. I don't know the
Yeah,
process, but or
I don't know either. I'm just
do they
curious.
include that in the response? It'll be that, yeah, I'm curious how that's going to work. And if this is something that is even, maybe they will determine that they did indeed get the information.
And they somehow missed it.
Right.
And I'm imagining some of the response you've gotten to this, people obviously say great journalistic work, great research. Other people probably giving you grief.
Yeah, I mean, but that's okay. That's part of what I do. I mean, in the end, I think is Alex Murdaugh where he belongs in prison? Yeah,
Yeah.
he was convicted of the financial crimes. He clearly was doing some very bad things to a lot of people, taking advantage of people, stealing their money. So he's where he belongs. But when it comes to this murder trial, did they get him there the right way? I have a lot of questions about that. I mean, we're all entitled to a fair trial.
Yeah, that's what people
Well,
have to do is remove the name Alex Murdaugh from you and just take these facts and decide
Right.
that's fair, right?
well,
Yeah.
so another thing, well, I just popped in my head while we were talking, because Jen and I sometimes we'll talk and we'll just bring up all these things that we that we, you know, run through our heads. And I was having lunch with Blanca last week, and one of the things that came up was she saw a truck that she did not believe to be one of the Murdoch trucks at the house earlier that day. Like, well, maybe that should be something that would be looked into. Like, whose truck was that?
Whose truck was that? Was it CB Rose? Was it, but there's just so many questions. And I always like think back to my initial questions before the first trial. And, the two weapons being used was always bizarre to me.
Yeah.
The cleanup, I mean, clearly he was there. The Snapchat video puts him at the scene. Um, so in any way, shape, or form, he likely, if he didn't pull the trigger, he knows who did. Um,
And if he did, he had some help. It seems like he would have needed some help to
right,
with the cleanup, with the exposing of guns, all that stuff.
right. So I
Seems like.
just so many questions that I still had after that trial.
And there might be,
And we may never know. We
right.
may never know.
Yeah. And there might be a lot of
And
cases like
yeah,
that. You know,
yeah.
it's not like
Um,
TV where everything's like in a nice little bow all the time on a
Yeah, as much as I want it to be a little bowl and want to know all the answers, I probably never will. But yeah, I mean that truck is an interesting point. And Maggie's clothes being folded on the floor, like what was that? Just I have so many
It,
questions.
definitely. I mean, Blanca is writing a book, and I think it's going to
I
be really
can't wait.
interesting because she is going to she has a behind the scenes kind of look that no one else has because she was there every day. So
And
she
she knew
their
Maggie,
habits. She knew their habits, and she knew Maggie, and
right?
I think it's going to be one definitely worth checking out.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one.
Jenn Wood from Fitz News, and you're on the social media too, doing the TikTok, as the kids
The
say.
TikTok, the TikTok, and my daughter's always like, "You're doing it wrong, Mom." I'm like,
Yeah,
"Okay."
yeah. Is it under, or do you do it under Fitz News or do it under your name?
I have my own TikTok account and like FITSNews posts the same thing. So
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
yeah,
go find her. She's doing an amazing job, and always cool talking with you, Jen. Appreciate it.
thanks for having me.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Talk
Bye.
soon.
She's always super nice to chat with, and she did some hard work on this one to go through all those
I
files.
know she's the one to do it. She just has, I guess, more attention than attention skills than we have.
I guess.
But yeah, no, that was a lot of work, and I think it is always interesting after you have been involved in a case just to kind of go back in later and put a fresh set of eyes on it. So
Yes.
I appreciate her doing that, especially knowing that it's a possibility that he might get a new trial, that all of these things may be important at some point.
Well, a new trial would be interesting on the side of both the prosecution and defense would have to reevaluate what they did and might have a whole new strategy. You don't know.
I would think that they would.
Right.
It didn't work the last time.
Well, the defense would definitely need a new strategy, but the prosecution, even
Yeah,
though they
the
won,
defense
might
would
have
need a
new
new strategy. It did not work, but there was a lot of information. There was a 6-week trial, so I'm sure that they're probably going back in and reviewing all these things as well.
So again, thank you to Jenn from Fitz News, and we'll have that link in our show notes for you. Again, we're also on YouTube, the YouTube channel Impact of Influence, and we'd love you to support our sponsors, Mint Mobile and Quince, and we will talk soon, friend. Always grateful.